The market was becoming scanty. She had just a few brooms left. She decided that it was time. She laid Ijikme down on her wrapper under the shed of the herb seller. Taking one final look at him, she blinked back tears. Then she turned to the herbal woman and said, "Please, help me look after my son. I want to urinate. I'll be back shortly, okay?" The woman nodded, reaching to touch Ijikme's head. "He's such a calm baby." Nneka forced a small smile. She turned and walked away, and she never returned. Umaka was a small, quiet Igbo village tucked between two low hills and surrounded by swaying palm trees and stubborn red soil. Life there was simple, and it was a very peaceful community. Despite the peace and serenity, Okafor and his family were not happy because Nneka had become pregnant for the 5th time. It was an unwanted pregnancy, as they had decided not to have more children. But it had been 10 years since her last child. She thought those days were over. But fate had other plans as she suddenly began to feel nauseous and was confirmed pregnant again at 42. The baby inside her kicked, as if unaware of the burden it carried. A burden neither she nor Okafor was prepared for. The Okafors were humble, kind and well-respected in their little corner of Umwaka village, but they were also very poor. Okafor was a simple, hard-working farmer, yet year after year his crops disappointed him. It was as if the ground itself was working against him, because he never had enough to feed his household. His wife, Nneka, did what she could, making and selling local brooms made from palm fronds, walking from compound to compound with a worn tray balanced on her head and a forced smile on her tired face. Together they were raising 4 well-behaved, obedient children who understood their family's struggles without needing to be told. Each child helped in their own little way, fetching firewood, assisting on the farm, and helping their mother in making brooms after school. Okafor and his wife were done with childbearing, so when Nneka became pregnant again, 10 years after her last child, it wasn't a blessing they celebrated, they were sad. When her stomach began to rise, Nneka wept in silence, not out of joy, but fear. What would they feed another child? What clothes would the baby wear? They both said nothing about the pregnancy, but their silence screamed louder than words. People talked. Ha! At their age, as poor as they are, she still allowed herself to become pregnant. Does she want to die at childbirth? Nneka walked past such comments with her head down. Eventually, she stopped hawking her brooms because of the stares and whispers that followed her. Then, one night, under a sky heavy with rain clouds, the labour began. The pain came fast and cruel. Nneka doubled over beside the cooking fire, holding her stomach and screaming. "Okafor, it's time!" she cried, her voice slicing through the night. Her husband dropped his machete and ran to her side, panic flooding his face. "Stay here, I'll get Mamare," he said, rushing barefoot into the darkness. Within minutes, Mama Effie was inside their home, rolling up her sleeves and barking orders. Nneka was laid on the floor mat, her wrapper soaked through. Her cries echoed through the night, loud enough to wake the neighbours. Mama Ife placed a wrinkled hand on her belly. Her brows furrowed. "This child, the head is big," she muttered. "It's not going to be easy." Nneka screamed again, her voice a mixture of fear and pain. With every ounce of strength left in her body, she pushed for nearly an hour. Her breath came in sharp gasps, sweat poured down her face, and then, finally, a loud, sharp cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Mama Ife announced softly, lifting the baby gently. But something was wrong. The baby's head was noticeably large and shaped, oddly, swollen toward the top, soft in strange places. His eyes, cloudy, glassy, remained still. He didn't blink when light passed. Neka, weak and shaking, stretched out her arms. "Let me see him." Mama Efe hesitated, then brought the baby close. Neka looked, her tired eyes scanning his face. "Why? Why is his head like that?" she whispered. It could be nothing, or maybe something we can't say yet," Mama Efe said carefully. Neka's breath quickened. She took a closer look at him and asked, Is he blind?" Mama Efe looked away. She waved her hand in front of the child's eyes, no response. "I don't know, it's too early to say, but his eyes are not responding like they should." Neka's heart sank, her body trembled. "No, please God, not this too." The baby, unaware of the storm around him, gurgled softly in her arms, his face calm. Okafor stood in the corner, his fists clenched, his eyes burning. He had feared this child would come with trouble. Now he feared what would happen next. Neka rocked her child gently, tears running down her face, soaking the top of his large head. Mama Efe packed her things slowly and left. No one said a word. Only the baby cried, and his mother wept with him. For 2 days after the birth, the Okafor household was quiet. Not out of peace, but from the heavy weight of uncertainty. The baby slept most of the time, bundled in old wrappers beside his mother. His large, oddly shaped head rose and fell with each soft breath. By the 3rd day, word had spread like dry firewood catching flame. "Have you seen Neka's child? They say the head is as big as a mortar. What kind of child is that?" Neighbours began to drop by, some out of concern, many out of curiosity. They came with gifts, but their eyes kept drifting to the baby's head. They tried to hide their shock, but the whispers came once they stepped outside. Neka lay on the bamboo bed, her face blank. She forced herself to thank them, to smile when necessary, but deep inside, she was breaking. Her body had barely healed from the brutal labour, and now her heart had begun its own silent bleeding. Her husband, Okafor, didn't speak much either. He sat outside most of the day, chewing dry sticks and staring at nothing. He would come in, glance at the baby without picking him up, and leave again. They named the baby Ejikeme. By the 3rd week, Neka noticed the baby would still not follow light. Not even candlelight. She would wave her hand before his eyes, nothing. She clapped. He didn't flinch. She shook a rattle. Still nothing. The midwife was invited to check on him. Mama Ife looked long and hard at the child. She repeated the tests, held him up to the window, let sunlight fall on his face. No response. She sighed deeply. "Neka, I feared this from the day you had him. I am sorry to inform you that he can't see." Neka turned away and burst into tears. When Okafor came home that evening, she told him. He didn't react. He simply walked past her, sat down and picked up his hoe to clean the blade. "Oh, it's true," he muttered. "He is blind." The words hung in the room like a curse. After that day, everything changed. Neka became quieter. She fed the baby, bathed him, rocked him when he cried, but with a heaviness in her chest that never left. Sometimes she stared at him and whispered, "What did I do wrong?" Other times, she wept while he slept. Okafor grew colder. He didn't ask about the child, didn't hold him, didn't even say his name. And their children and Ejikeme's older siblings avoided Ejikeme like a stain. Amaka, the eldest, refused to carry him. Chibuike, Sompto and Ikena never asked about their baby brother. They didn't sit near him or play beside him. When he cried, they would sigh loudly and leave the room. One afternoon, Amaka was overheard saying to her friend in school, "He's not like us. His head is too big, and he just stares at the wall." Children in the village began calling Amaka and her brother names. "See the siblings of a blind boy with a big head." The ridicule crept into the Okafor compound like a sickness. Nneka tried to defend her son, but her voice had no strength. 3 months had passed since Ejikeme came into the world. Nneka had done all she could as a mother. Out of desperation, she had taken Ejikeme to the village medicine man, Dibia Okuri, known for his skill in healing strange illnesses. The old man examined the boy carefully, chanting, rubbing herbs over his eyelids and whispering ancient incantations. But after days of effort, he shook his head solemnly and said, "This child's eyes are shut not by man but by destiny. He may have to remain this way for life." Those words shattered what little hope Nneka had been clinging to. This confirmed what everyone had feared. He was blind. Completely. Nneka had accepted her reality with silent grief. Her husband, Okafor, however, buried himself deeper in emotional distance. He had not once carried the child, not even for a second. Not once had he asked, "Has he eaten?" or "How is he sleeping?" It was as though Ejikeme didn't exist in his world, and the siblings, they had stopped even calling him by name. At best, they referred to him as that one. Nneka bore it all, but life had to continue. So, one morning, just as the cock crowed, Nneka tied Ejikeme on her back and stepped out with her tray of newly made palm frond brooms to hawk. Her arms were sore from binding the stalks for hours the previous day, but she had to sell. That was her only source of income and way to assist her husband. As she walked through the village, whispers trailed her like shadows. "That's the woman with the blind, big-headed child. God have mercy, that's not an ordinary child." Some would laugh, others just stared with pity mixed with disgust. Nneka pretended not to hear. But the sting burned deep inside her chest. At home, Okafor still acted like nothing mattered. One evening she had tried to speak to him. She stood by the door while he sharpened his hoe. "Okafor, don't you even want to carry your son? Not once? Carry which son? Is he truly my son?" he yelled at her angrily. Nneka blinked, shocked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the gods may be punishing you for something I don't know about. But me? I have no hand in this child's condition," he fired back at her. She turned and walked away, tears rolling down her face. That night, while breastfeeding Ejikeme, she wept silently. Her baby lay peacefully in her arms, unaware of how unwanted he was in the very place he should have been most loved. Eventually, Nneka resumed her old routine of travelling to the big Umudike village market to sell brooms in bulk and sleep over. Umudike was a neighbouring village with a big market where traders from the city visited to buy farm produce in large quantity. She used to go there once every month with large quantity of brooms for sale. She would leave Umuaka in the afternoon, get to Umudike in the night, and sleep over in the market stalls, then wake up very early the next morning and display her brooms for sale. Nneka resumed going to the market, strapping Ejikeme on her back. But even in Umudike, peace did not meet her. The moment people saw the baby on her back, their eyes would narrow, lips curl, and whispers would begin. "Who brings that kind of child to the market?" some muttered. "Look at his head. This is not ordinary." One woman made the sign of the cross and walked away. A man who had just picked 3 brooms from her tray dropped them immediately when he saw the baby. Another group of women avoided her completely, crossing to the other side of the market and whispering that she was carrying a curse on her back. Although she still managed to sell her brooms, the rejection and mocking stares ate deeper into her spirit. It was on her 3rd visit to Umudike, after someone spat near her feet and said, "You shouldn't bring that child out again. He carries darkness," that Neka finally broke inside. That night, she sat beside her sleeping baby and stared at him for hours, heart full of sorrow and confusion. She decided that she couldn't carry the shame any longer. Her home had become a graveyard of laughter. Her husband had turned to stone. Her children now walked past her as if she was invisible. Since the birth of Ejikeme, her world had crumbled. And the worst part? No one tried to help her rebuild it. So, Neka made a decision. She would travel to Anioma, a far-off village where no one knew her name, just like every other market trip. She had only been to Anioma Market once, about 5 years back. It was a bigger market compared to that of Umudike, but she didn't go back there again because of the distance. This time she wouldn't be returning with everything she left home with. There, in that strange market, she would do what her heart could barely carry. She would leave Ejikeme behind. He was 6 months old at this time. Neka returned to her village and made some brooms, assisted by Chisholm, her 11-year-old son. Then the D-Day came. Neka lied to her husband, Okafor, that she was going to Umudike as usual. Then she prepared quickly. She bathed Ejikeme gently, as if preparing him for a ceremony. She dressed him in his old faded clothes and placed him on a soft wrapper. Then she picked up a small brown wrist bead, one she had found many years ago and kept hidden in her old purse. It had once been her late mother's. A charm for protection. Now, she didn't know if it would protect or simply serve as a memory. She placed the bead gently around Ejikeme's wrist and adjusted it to fit in. Then she sat beside him and stared at him as tears began to stream down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ejikeme," she whispered through her tears. "I tried. God knows I tried. But I'm tired. I'm tired of being mocked, of seeing people spit when they see you, of hearing your father pretend you're not alive. I don't have strength again. Even your brothers and sister, they won't touch you. They call you names. They act like you're not their blood. I don't know what I did to deserve this, my son. I don't know why you were born this way. Maybe it's my sin, maybe it's punishment, but my heart can't take it anymore." She kissed his forehead, sobbing harder. "I hope, wherever you end up, someone will be kind to you. Maybe someone better and stronger than me. Maybe someone who sees more than your head. Or your eyes." She sat there, rocking him gently for a few more minutes. Her heart felt like it would stop, but her decision had already been made. With trembling hands, she strapped him securely to her back, picked up her big sack of brooms, and began the long walk to Anioma. She got there by dusk, found a quiet corner in the market, and sat down. Other traders had arrived too and were resting, waiting for the next day to begin trading activities. She ate the little food she had come with. She also breastfed Etime, and then rested for the night. Very early the next day, she found a small space near one Mama Ifunanya, a woman selling herbs, and quietly set down her wares. "Good morning," the woman greeted. Neka nodded. "Please, let me sell here with you." She began selling. People bought brooms and paid in cash. Some looked at the sleeping child strapped on her back and asked questions, but she just smiled vaguely. Hours passed and the market was becoming scanty. She had just a few brooms left. She decided that it was time. She laid Ijikme down on her wrapper under the shed of the herb seller. Taking one final look at him, she blinked back tears. She tied the money she had made on the helm of her wrapper. Then she turned to the herbal woman and said, "Please, help me look after my son. I want to urinate. I'll be back shortly, okay?" The woman nodded, reaching to touch Ijikme's head. "He's such a calm baby." Neka forced a small smile. She turned and walked away, and she never returned. 2 hours later, the market was winding down. Mama Ifunanya grew restless. She had checked the nearby path twice. No sign of the mother. "Where is this woman now?" she asked the other traders. No one knew her name. No one knew where she came from. She was just a stranger like many others. Mama Ifunanya touched the bead around the boy's wrist, then cradled him gently. He didn't cry. His eyes, open, cloudy and unmoving, stared into a void. It was then she realized that the boy was not responding to light, that he was blind. She asked around. No one knew the woman. No one had seen where she came from. She decided to take the child to the palace. With heavy steps and the child wrapped securely in her arms, she left the market and began the walk to the palace. In Anioma, such matters were not taken lightly. Every child belonged to the community, and the palace was the first place to seek wisdom. At the palace, King Maduabuchi, king of Anioma, sat on his throne, in a meeting with a woman draped in an elegant lace wrapper, with soft gold earrings that sparkled each time she moved. Her name was Lady Uluchi Nuoko, a wealthy daughter of the land, now living in the city, where she ran chains of fashion and skincare businesses. She had returned briefly to pay her respects to the king and visit the graves of her late parents. Uluchi had once been married, a beautiful, devoted wife. But 10 years into the union, her husband had walked away, coldly and without regret, when she couldn't conceive. Since then, she had remained unmarried and focused on her business. Mama Ifunyanya arrived, breathing heavily, holding the strange baby. The palace guards allowed her in on the king's instruction. "My king, please forgive me," she said, bowing low. "This child was abandoned at the market. The mother disappeared. She never returned." The king's eyes narrowed as he gestured for her to come closer. Oluchi turned her head sharply to see. Mama Ifunanya gently unwrapped the cloth. The queen, sitting nearby, gasped softly. "Who would abandon a baby like this?" she whispered. But before the king could respond, Oluchi stood up. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady, eyes wet, "please, let me take him." Everyone turned to her. "I may not know where he came from or who his mother is, but this child is human," she continued. "Blind, different, abandoned, yes, but still a child, still worthy of love." She knelt before the king. "Let me have him. I promise to give him everything he needs. I've waited all my life to be called a mother. If this is the child God placed in my path, then so be it." The palace fell silent. The king studied her face for a long time, then turned to his queen, who gave a slow, approving nod. "Oluchi, your heart is pure," the king finally said. "But we must be sure. There are rules in this land. We will keep this child in the palace for 3 days. If no one comes forward, if his mother does not return or send word, then he shall be yours." Oluchi bowed low. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The king handed the baby to the queen. "Take him. Let the palace maids bathe and feed him. He will sleep here, in the arms of royalty, for 3 nights. For the next 3 days, Ejikeme lived in unexpected warmth. The palace maids carried him gently, fed him with pap. They dressed him in soft clothes. The queen herself sat with him each evening, humming lullabies she hadn't sung in years. But no one came. No mother, no relative. No one asked for the baby. By the third morning, the king summoned Alucci again. "No one has come," he said quietly. "Not even a whisper, it is clear." He was left behind. He turned to his guards and gestured. Moments later, the queen entered, holding the baby. "What will you name him?" the king asked. Alucci looked down at him, a smile forming through the tears in her eyes. "He was abandoned, but not forgotten. I'll name him Chukwanonso. God is still with us." The king nodded. "So be it. From this day forward, let it be known across Anioma and beyond. This child, Chukwanonso Alucci Nwoko, is no longer fatherless. He has been claimed," and with that, she wrapped the baby in a beautiful velvet cloth, kissed his forehead, and left the palace in her waiting car and her driver, with a new name, a new life, and a second chance for them both. As for Necker, the moment she left the market stall in Anioma, claiming to be going to urinate, her legs picked up speed. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest, and tears spilled from her eyes as she walked briskly through the lonely, bushy path, turning only once to glance behind her. There was no one following her. She was sure she had been out of sight before the panic gripped her, but she kept moving. By the time night fell, she had walked into a small, quiet village she didn't even know the name of. She wandered through a narrow path until she found an abandoned half-roofed mud hut near a cassava farm. She pushed the creaky door open, stepped inside, and collapsed. Alone in the dark, Necker wept like a wounded animal. Loud, shaking sobs filled the silence. She hugged her knees and rocked back and forth, gasping for air. "What kind of mother does this?" she cried. "What have I done? What have I done, God?" But her tears brought no comfort. Her chest remained heavy. By dawn, the tears had dried, but the guilt clung to her like sweat. She stepped out of the hut and began the slow journey back to Umwaka, her wrapper dusty and her eyes hollow. It was already midday when Umwaka village came into view. When she got home, Okafor was sitting on the bench outside, his farming hoe resting beside him. He had come home early from the farm that day, complaining of chest pain. When he saw her, his brows lifted in surprise. "You're back? Where's the child?" Necker stood still, her lips trembling. He's gone," she said, barely above a whisper. Okafor stood, suddenly alert. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" She broke down in tears again. I stopped to rest on the way, under one mango tree, along a bushy path. He was sleeping beside me, wrapped well. Then a mad dog came out of nowhere. It chased me. I ran, screaming. I didn't even remember I left him behind, and when I returned, he was gone. I searched the nearby bushes and called out to see if there was anyone around, but I didn't see him and no one responded either. Silence. She watched Okafor's face carefully, bracing for anger, but he simply exhaled, sat back down, and picked a stick to clean his fingernails. "So, that's it?" he asked flatly. "He's gone?" Necker nodded, wiping her eyes. He grunted. "What can we do?" He didn't even ask further questions. He simply accepted it. To him, Ejekeme had been a thorn, not a child. When the children returned from school later that day and didn't find their baby brother, none of them asked questions. It was as if they, too, had already erased him from memory. By evening, the story had spread like wildfire. Some villagers believed her story, while others didn't. Some avoided her completely, casting glances but saying nothing. Others showed her fake pity, shaking their heads and sighing loudly whenever she passed. The whispers followed her everywhere. But as weeks turned into months, the heat of the story faded. Another woman gave birth. Someone else lost a husband. New gossip replaced the old one. Eventually, Ejikme's name stopped being mentioned and life moved on, but Neka never really got over it. Whenever she was alone, she cried and wondered if she did the right thing. The day Lady Oluchi Nwoko returned to the city with the little boy in her arms, the staff in her sprawling compound knew something had changed. There was a glow on her face they hadn't seen in years, a gentleness in her voice that softened even the hardest corners of the mansion. She took Chokyunonzo to the hospital for a general checkup, especially because of his head, but he was certified okay by the pediatrician. She also took him to a renowned eye specialist in the city, hoping for a miracle. After a series of tests and careful examinations, the doctor explained that the boy's blindness was due to optic nerve atrophy, a condition where the nerves that connect the eyes to the brain are damaged or underdeveloped. He also noted signs of congenital glaucoma, which had caused increased pressure in the eyes from birth, further impairing vision. "I'm afraid," the doctor said gently, "his condition is permanent. His eyes are healthy in shape, but the connection to the brain is not functioning." This broke Oluchi's heart, but she took it in good fate. She then returned home and handed him over to a newly hired middle-aged nanny. "Treat him like he came from my womb," she said with tears in her eyes, and that nanny did just that. The nanny, Mama Bisi, a warm, motherly woman in her 50s, became Chukunonso's second mother. She fed him carefully, wrapped his body in the finest cotton clothes, and massaged his large head every morning with warm oil. When people whispered about the size of his head, she would smile and say, "That head is carrying something the world will marvel at." In Lady Oluchi's home, he was not a burden, he was a blessing. And Oluchi gave him everything she had longed to give a child: warmth, structure, books, toys, lullabies, bedtime prayers, and unconditional love. When Chokyunonzo turned 2, Oluchi enrolled him in Living Light School for the Blind, a place known for nurturing children with special needs and treating them with dignity and care. There the world opened up to him in ways even his mother could not have imagined. He learnt to read and write using Braille, running his tiny fingers across raised dots as if he were reading stars. He learnt to navigate the classroom and hallways using a white cane, learning to count his steps and feel the shape of the world through sound and air. He also learnt to identify people by their voices, locate objects using echolocation training, and pour water into a cup by listening to the rise of the liquid. The teachers were patient and joyful, trained to understand not just how to teach blind children, but how to truly see them, beyond their disabilities. And because most of his classmates were also blind or partially sighted, his large head never drew laughter or shame. In a world of darkness, no one saw him as different. There, Chukunonso was just like everyone else, a child learning, growing, becoming. At home, Oluchi would sit beside him in the evenings, listening to him tell her how his day went, what he had touched, what he had heard, what he had learnt. His speech became clear, confident, even funny at times. She would hold his hand and say, "You are the greatest gift God ever gave me." She meant it. In his presence, she no longer felt barren. By the time he turned 7, something new began to rise in him. Something beautiful, something sacred. It started with humming. Then came full songs. Chokyunonso began to sing. Not just sing, but sing in a way that touched people's hearts. His voice was pure, hauntingly beautiful, and full of emotion far beyond his age. Mama Bisi would stand in the kitchen, frozen in place as he sang. Gardeners would pause their work to listen. Oluchi watched him one evening, sitting on a small chair in the courtyard, singing. The melody floated in the air like incense. She placed her hand on her chest and cried. It was then she knew. God had not just given her a son, He had given her a voice of light. Living Light School for the Blind was invited for a children's regional singing competition for special needs. The school chose Chukwununzo. The preparations began. His voice coach, a gentleman named Mr. Fred, trained him daily, helping him polish his tone, breathe through long lines, and connect emotionally with every word he sang. On the day of the competition, Oluchi held his hand tightly as they entered the large auditorium filled with families, school banners, and excited children. When it was his turn, he was led gently to the microphone, cane in one hand. He began to sing. He sang a simple song, one about God's love, about being seen even when the world looks away, about how broken things can still shine. And when he finished, the hall was quiet for a moment. Then came the tears, then the applause, then the standing ovation. He won the competition. His coach was so proud of him. That night, as they returned home, Oluchi looked at Chukwununso sleeping beside her in the car, then looked out the window and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for not just giving me what I asked for. Thank you for giving me more." From that day on, Chukwununso became known beyond his school walls. Invitations came in for church performances, TV interviews, and musical mentorships. His voice moved people to tears, brought strangers to their knees, and turned hardened hearts soft. He was no longer just the blind boy with the big head. He was a child of light, a melody from heaven, and in Lady Oluchi's world he was everything. But unknown to her, and even to him, this was only the beginning. Dear viewers, there are children born into this world carrying burdens they never chose. Children with special needs, disabilities, and conditions that make them look or live differently from others. Behind every one of those children is a mother, a father, or a caregiver doing their best to hold it all together. When we mock these children, when we whisper, stare, or look away in disgust, we're not just hurting them, we're crushing the very hearts of those who love them. Sometimes, those little acts of cruelty are what push struggling parents over the edge, into silence, isolation, or even regretful decisions they can never undo. Let this story remind us, every child, regardless of their condition, is human. They deserve love, dignity, and protection. Be kind. Be compassionate. Not every parent has the strength to fight alone. Your words can either lift them up or break them completely. Please, be kind with your words. To every parent raising a child with special needs, please know this: your love is their greatest gift. Ignore the side talks, the stares, and the unkind whispers. The world may not always understand your journey, but you are chosen for that child for a reason. Be strong. Be proud. Be present. Stand tall for your child, because your courage today is shaping their tomorrow. Answer this question honestly. Do you blame Nneka for her decision to do away with her son, Ejikeme? The story hasn't ended. Watch out for part 2.